This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. Welcome back to the research talks here on Stockbox with Alan Green on what is over in the Netherlands for certain a very nice blue sky. And it was a warm day yesterday, 16 degrees outside. It was lovely. It was t-shirt weather outside for me yesterday. What's it like over in the UK?
It was very nearly t-shirt weather here yesterday as well, Mark. It was, a really nice day. And I got out for a walk about midday, went up onto the top of Seaford Head. And of course, it's God's own country up there. So a glorious day. The weather's not quite so good here today. I think we've got some rain coming in about midday. But certainly there are some grey clouds, but the sun is poking through here and there. So, certainly a lot warmer, which, of course, is the best thing.
The best thing. I do need to correct you, though. I believe that Yorkshire is God's own county, not Seaford. Just,
Spoken like a true Yorkshireman.
Indeed.
Okay, but I would wager that any Yorkshireman that comes down here and stands on Seaford Head, looking along to the Beltooth Lighthouse, so you can see the Seven Sisters, that iconic view. In fact, it's been featured on the covers of so many books. Mm-hmm. The iconic view of Britain. I think that actually pips most views in Yorkshire to the post. But
okay, well, I'll visit you one day, Alan, and we can do a research talks live from Seaford Head, and
In fact, with my old colleague Zach Meir, we were going to do a regular broadcast called "The View from Beachy Head" some years ago, which of course has a whole different set of connotations. But,
indeed.
but no, the views are fantastic up there. They really are beautiful.
Okay. Good. Well, talking about fantastic views, the nickel price, of course, this week, 250% spike there, and the LME suspending trading, which is unheard of. And of course, we've seen gold hit all-time highs, copper hit all-time highs, oil. At the same time, the dollar is doing quite well. So I think it's still very much a kind of risk-off environment, because people are not sure which way it's going to go. But certainly commodities looking very strong at the moment, and of course the company we're going to talk about today is Corcel PLC, who are in that space, and of course Premier African as well, who've done a recent deal, who are also in the lithium space.
Yep.
So what do you think's been going on, Alan?
They're both in the space, aren't they? Well, of course the company that we both know, Mark, Kavango Resources, has a huge asset down that they're developing in Botswana called the KSZ. And geologically, that asset's very similar to the Norilsk mine in Siberia, of course. And the Norilsk mine is absolutely huge. It produces, I think, 20% of the world's nickel and similar percentages of the other commodities too. It's just a mine on a gargantuan scale, but with every single critical mineral, certainly for the battery industry going forward. And of course, that has been completely cut out of the market. So that's out of the global commodity market, and that, and of course other mines in Russia too have put a spin on commodity prices. There's also the fact that Russia supplies wheat and corn to Africa, and it's one of the biggest exporters there. So of course all of the commodity prices, soft commodities, are all up in the air too. While both investors and pundits try and guesstimate where the markets will end up, and of course how long this will last. Will Putin see sense? Somehow I doubt it. And, how long is the war going to last? How long will the sanctions last? Anyone's guess, but I don't think it's going to be a quick fix by any stretch of the imagination. So,
No. And of course, who are the world's biggest fertilizer exporters as well? You've got Canada, and the other two, Belarus and Russia. So
exactly. Yeah, that's it. And of course, Ukraine too. Ukraine supplies huge amounts of grain to Africa. So of course, the industry there has been all but terminated. I think I read somewhere this morning that 50% of the GDP of Ukraine has stopped completely. It's almost ceased to exist as an economy. Some businesses there are taking over, but of course, how long they can continue to do that is anyone's guess, because Russia is just wrecking the infrastructure, it's just wrecking the country completely. So of course that's going to have an impact too, and the demand is still there. The demand will need to be satisfied. So of course, it automatically brings a price squeeze in. And of course, we were saying before we came on air that this disconnect that we're currently seeing between commodity prices and the prices of, or the share prices of companies actually developing these assets, or exploring, discovering these assets and then developing them, is the disconnect is illogical. But I think we know better than to bring logic into the markets, where this is concerned. But I think most pundits are of the view, and certainly I know you and I are, that we are very much looking to a correction at some point. And I think when that correction comes, we're going to see some prices of, or the share prices of some companies with a raft of assets in this area. We're going to see those prices double, quadruple, who knows, 10 baggers.
Yeah, well, it will be about time when that happens, and just try everyone to stay in the markets longer than the markets might allow you to, because I do feel a boom in commodities and mining is getting very close now.
Indeed, I agree.
Okay, so what company do you want to take first, Alan?
Let's talk about Corcel.
Corcel.
Of course, Corcel is it's a company that has a portfolio of battery metal exploration projects, power generation, and storage assets. So it's this unique combination, and we're seeing more of this now. We've seen companies like Technology Minerals with a circular economy model, and of course, Corcel has this unique combination, very much on trend with the UK government and the macro picture to move towards a net zero and decarb trend. So the company has of course a series of assets. It has the Mambari nickel cobalt asset in eastern Papua New Guinea, and of course the Wowo Gap asset also in southeastern Papua New Guinea. And I won't go into the history of how these have evolved. Suffice to say that in October last year, Corcel announced that the Wowo project acquisition had been completed, and that work was being undertaken to provide a mineral resource estimate, and also offtake agreements and so on. So that has very much moved forward. So Corcel, the share price currently is trading at 1.5p, has been as high as 2.4p, and that was earlier on in the year, and as low as a penny. That gives the company a market capitalization of 6.2 million, which I think for the raft of assets it has and where it's positioned right now looks laughably low. And I'll attempt to qualify that now. So I'm going to deal firstly. I'm going to go back to the metals projects. The Wowo project is a cobalt. It's a nickel and cobalt project, and of course these are key battery metals. We've just discussed the incredible moves with nickel, the suspension in the London market, and indeed Corcel themselves published a tweet. Just the other day, saying, of course, that the company notes the significant rise in nickel prices and the favourable impact on the economics of its upstream battery portfolio. So the Wowo Gap JORC upgrade and gap analysis is underway. We'll have news on that, no doubt, given where nickel has gone to. We'll have news and updates on that in the very near future. But of course, the company's base case assumptions are at a much lower price than the asset is now, and it was the project worked very comfortably at that level. So where the nickel price is now, if that can be sustained, or if it's close to where we are now, then it does it does mean that economically, both Wowo and Mambare are extremely or potentially extremely profitable for Corcel going forward. With Mambare, just the latest on that, the mining lease application process is progressing. It's with the National Executive Council in New Guinea, which is most likely the final step in the application process. And I'm sure, for the government there, having such a potentially profitable and cash generative asset in its jurisdiction, it should make moves to get this passed pretty quickly. So work can then commence to get this into the market, and obviously start supplying what will be a supply gap in both the availability of nickel and cobalt. So from a resource standpoint, the future is looking very bright for Corcel, particularly given where the market cap is at the moment. Yeah, the price of Corcel has edged up in recent days, but it doesn't seem to have moved in line with this huge surge in the nickel price. So again, there is a valuation gap to be addressed there. So the other side of the business, the Corcel business, is in the temporary power arena, and this is where Corcel has several assets in the UK. This is the Tring Road asset, and of course the Avonmouth and the Burwell asset. So the company has moved to develop and bring these on stream, both in terms of bringing investors in and getting the agreements in place, and the projects combined are in the region of 170 megawatts and set to come on stream in the next year to 18 months. If they're taking a peer group comparison, and the peer group comparison here is with Mast Developments and other privately based suppliers in the UK, peer comparison group in Industry Metrics points to some 900%. An upside of some 900% on the value of these assets alone. And when you consider, of course, the increase in the cost of electricity, the increase in electricity prices going forward, when a project is costed out at the lower price, it does mean that there's potentially a much bigger opportunity for these temporary power projects to make money going forward. So in terms of developments recently on this, in November, Corcel announced seeding investors for Tring Road had been put in place for the Tring Road and Avonmouth gas peaker projects. But the Avonmouth rights were extended indefinitely. The Arlington Roads, the Arlington Energy rights at Tring Road options were extended also, and during December and January and February, the company restructured its finances. So 15% of the debt, or the legacy debt that the company had, was sold to a vehicle owned by the chairman James Parsons, the C4 vehicle, and that's been converted into equity. So he's converted just under 130,000 into shares with an 18-month lock-in, and also there was a partial debt conversion and combined debt and equity conversion, raising a further 1,050,000 announced on February 21st. So this obviously sets the company, or structures the company financially, and puts it in a very strong position. Again, still not really reflected in the movement, in any share price or any significant share price movement. February the 24th was the biggest and most significant step, I think, for the company in the temporary power market to date. The Avonmouth asset was provisionally awarded a 15-year capacity market contract by the National Grid, priced at £30.59. So, of course, that means going forward, the company has visibility in terms of revenues. A large part of its revenues are effectively guaranteed, and I'm sure the contract will take into account if there are any further price increases going forward. Then that some of that or part of those contracts can be renegotiated. But what it does, it gives Corcel revenue visibility, which of course is the most difficult step to take when you're developing assets like this. You're bringing investors in, and of course you've got a projection as to where it's going to go, but you've still got to win the contract, and that was a contract win, which is really the biggest step the company has taken to date. So, in summary, for Corcel, you've just a note on the board. Of course, Scott Keynes, you've spoken to Mark previously, and I've also spoken to him as well. Scott's a shareholder in the business, and he certainly acquired shares and has share options in the company going forward. Also, worth noting that Align Research are a shareholder in the business, and of course, Align. Align are appropriately named because they tend to align themselves in terms of shareholdings with a lot of the companies they write about. But I think the note that they wrote in July last year, which will probably be updated very soon, I think is highly significant, and it just sets out the summary investment case. And of course, the fact is that with WoWoGap now wholly owned by Corcel, it's set to become a major supplier, major nickel supplier and cobalt supplier to China, and likewise Manbari once the application has been approved by the National Executive Council in New Guinea. So in summary, there's upside from both revenue streams into the business. Also worth noting that a Lord Henry Bellingham has joined the board as an non-exec director as well, and he's a pretty prolific shareholder and investor into a number of companies, and is also director on a raft of other AIM companies. But given that the shares last year in Corcel popped up to over 2p on news of the developments with the cobalt assets and the nickel assets and the temporary power assets, they, to my mind, have in no way reflected the developments that have taken place since then and the incumbent value that's now in place within the company.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. I do like Corcel myself. We've spoken before, I think, a while ago about Corcel, and of course they have the full cycle, don't they, from mining the commodities for battery metals to the actual application for them in these flexible grid solutions. And of course, that recent news regarding the Avonmouth project securing the capacity markets contract is fantastic, and that really will help them to push on with getting their investing and thinking the funding to progress that project. I did do a bit of a round table with Scott and Stephen Wong, and we talked about that and really to understand what capacity markets are and how they work. But yeah, it's definitely the future. It'll be recognised one day, and of course with the nickel price as well, if that remains, or who knows what will happen there. But they've got a double winner there from both their angles of the business. So I think it's a good value to be had at this stage, and you might have to hold it a little while until it's recognised, but buy when it's cheap.
Exactly. Look at the assets we've discussed. Look at how significant they are and how relevant they are too in the current macro and geopolitical climate. With the uncertainty now through the Ukraine invasion, the uncertainty of both power supply, of both commodity supply, all of those factors should really feed into the positives for a company like Corcel. And I do think that the company is poised for a significant re-rating in the very near future.
Excellent. Okay. Well, on to Premier African Minerals then. And of course, we did speak about them recently, but a recent quite significant bit of news for Zulu, isn't there?
It's huge, yeah, and I think again, all of these assets that are owned by Premier African Minerals are positioned to benefit extremely well from the current macro uncertainty and the current geopolitical uncertainty. But just to go back and reiterate the portfolio of assets that's owned by Premier African, and there's a very good website. In fact, you can go to the website and there are very detailed explanations of all the projects. But I'm just going to run through those. So I'm going to get to the I think what is now the flagship, well, certainly the flagship asset, which of course is the Zulu lithium and tantalum mine, and I'll get to that last of all, because that of course is where the progress has really taken place and what has really reshaped the valuation and the investment proposition for the company. But in Zimbabwe, Premier African Minerals have own the RHA tungsten mine, which has a resource of 22 million tons. Premier have invested some $18 million to date there, and there is a processing capacity there of 40,000 tons per month and takeoff agreements. But of course, there's been some uncertainty in terms of the funding going forward. And in another asset that the company has in Namibia, which the Otjo Zundu manganese mine, where Premier owns 19%, there are discussions underway still for MN Holdings, the holding company, one of the other holding companies there, to part finance the RHA tungsten mine once Premier has completed its review. But of course, that's still very much ongoing, given the developments with the Zulu mine. And often when you get a company with a diverse portfolio of mineral assets like Premier, then the other assets get put on hold, and the focus is put onto the key one. So there's also an asset in Matabeleland, the Katata rare earth asset, 25 rare earth claims, Premier have undertaken trenching work there and drilled over 7 drill holes over some 1,200 meters. So that again is very much a key asset going forward, given the rarity of rare earths. Excuse the pun, but of course the scarcity of rare earth supply channels, and of course it's rare earths are very key both in clean technology industry and in defence and aerospace industries, and of course, China currently has most of the rare earth facilities under its own control, and it's key for the Western economies to seek to develop these rare earth assets. There's a fluorspar asset, the Tunde fluorspar asset, and again, Premier will be drilling shallow bore holes there to further assess the project. There's also a potash project in Ethiopia, and there were some shareholder changes there recently, where Circum Minerals, the Circum Minerals, where Premier has a holding in the company, were exchanged with shares in Vortex, and Vortex basically are to develop the project. So of course it still means that Premier has its shareholding now in Vortex. After de-risking, it's expected that Danica will produce some 750,000 tons per annum of potash, but currently with the uncertainty in Ethiopia, that also is being on hold. It is on hold too. So we then come to the Zulu lithium and tantalum project, which originally consisted of 14 mineral claims over 3.5 square kilometers. Drilling was undertaken previously, and the significant event for last year was, of course, the reversal of an historical impairment on the asset, and as a result of that impairment, for the 6 months to June last year, in its interim results, Premier declared an operating profit of 3.943 million. So hugely significant, of course, brought the company to the attention of shareholders, but it still meant that work had to commence on the Zulu project to, if you like, validate the value there. So in February, just before we spoke last time, Mark, of course, we spoke about the assays after an intensive drilling campaign. 6,000 meters were drilled after the impairment was reversed. The company, Premier, also announced that it had agreed heads of terms with a lithium manufacturer, Shango Solutions, and Stark Resources were hired to map out the ore body and also design the mine there too. And then, of course, we moved to most recently, a few days ago, a big step forward for the company in terms of validation and the size and the potential within the asset. Premier announced a funding from Suzhou, which is a Shenzhen Stock Exchange listed company worth over 5 billion sterling. And Suzhou have agreed to subscribe for 12 million sterling at 0.4p to fund the definitive feasibility study, which will, of course, be the step that takes it through to, or takes the company through to production. The company's also agreed to offtake rights to the marketing sale of at least 50% of the output of the finished mine. It also has the right to participate in any future funding round to maintain its holding at what is now 13.38% of Premier. But if it decides not to participate in future funding, then the offtake rights that I've just outlined there will reduce indirect participation to the shareholding. Also significant too, you've got two major shareholders, James Guernsey and George Rose. George owns 7% of Premier, so he's a significant shareholder. And George is a mining industry veteran, and I know you've interviewed him many times, Mark. And he's been, I've spoken to George myself last year, and he is a veteran of the industry, well known with the industry, and well respected. So as a major shareholder as well, which you always want your CEO to be, George, and the other major shareholder, Neil Herbert. I mentioned Neil, of course, in relation to the MN Holdings, the Otjikoto manganese mine. Neil and George Herbert have both agreed. George and Neil Herbert have agreed to support Suzhou when they elect a board candidate to go onto the board of Premier, and of course that's important because Suzhou will then have a say in how that develops going forward. But of course, this money that's been raised will be used of course for developing the Zulu lithium mine, but can also be used for other projects too. So what it does, whilst it validates the size and the potential of the Zulu lithium mine, it also brings the other projects that Premier has into focus, and the potential upside for those projects too. And there are a raft of them, as I say. I've outlined them briefly here in the talk, but if you go to the website, you'll see these projects outlined both in Zimbabwe and Mozambique. But certainly the Premier share price on the initial news popped up to as high as 53p. It's been as low as 0.14p, currently trading at 0.36p, giving the company a market capitalization of just under 65 million. And of course, this is the cycle. This is why we're all so invested into, and why we find the mining sector such an exciting place, because all of a sudden an asset has been sitting there for years can suddenly become valid and become important on the global scene. And as we said a little earlier in the talk, of course, the situation with the Ukraine invasion, the macro picture now, the squeeze on commodity prices, battery metal prices, nickel in particular, it brings a new dimension to some of these projects that have been dormant and have been inactive for years. And as we've seen with Premier already, we've seen the share price move up from 0.18p to 0.5p in very short order. Market cap's now 65 million. We saw with Greatland Gold in Australia, the company was at a similar position in its valuation, probably 10, 15, 20 million. And then all of a sudden, after Havieron was agreed, boom, it goes up. It's got a valuation of, at one point, I think 1.3 billion. And it's currently worth about 600 million now. But, that in itself, that delivers life-changing investment returns for people that have a position in those projects. So we're all going through difficult times, and I know when I spoke to Paul Johnson the other day, when we spoke, we were talking about the times investors are going through, and he's just constantly there encouraging investors, see the bigger picture. We've seen this before. We know how this works out, and the what can be delivered really makes all of this very worthwhile. It's not nice to be in the middle of it, certainly when the share prices continue to fall, but at some point they will turn round. And unfortunately, if there were a model that predicted the movement of commodity prices, and if there were an algorithm that could predict when the prices of small mining companies would start to come into play again, then the person that designs that would make an awful lot of money. But I think what you have to look at is companies that have assets that are nearing production and have the prospect of those assets being in production within the next few years. I think those companies, it's the share prices of those companies that start to move and start to catch up with the commodity price. The companies that have exploration assets that are in early stage, that's all well and good, but until they're at the stage where they are with the Zulu lithium project, which is now at DFS stage, and that's mine design, that's getting the thing up and running. That's when the value really starts to come out. So as an investment strategy, if you're coming into the markets for the first time, you might want to look at companies with assets that are late stage.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Alan. I must admit, when I saw that RNS from Premier, I thought, that's good. You've got 12 million there. Was it 1 million or 1.5 million immediate payment from the company?
Yep. 1.2 million.
1.2. Yeah.
1.2 million immediate payments. So immediately the company's funded, and the money will come in subsequently from Suzo, and of course that's we've seen this before. We've seen with Bacanora Lithium, of course, the Sonora Lithium project in Mexico. Ganfeng, the world's largest lithium company, have come in and now bought Bacanora. So that's what happens eventually. That's the full cycle. But that's, of course, just one project, and Premier have many projects. And I think what's interesting here is that Zulu is underway. That's great. So you've got a store of value there. You've got a floor of value too. But it also brings into play the other assets that the company has. And as I say, given the macro picture, I think the markets, the potential for a long-term run on commodities, and a run, albeit delayed, from small cap mining and exploration companies that are bringing these projects on stream. That's why you speak to so many mining company CEOs, and they're having the devil's own job getting hold of drilling rigs and companies to do the drilling, because they're all booked out. And the reason is that they realize they have these projects. If we can get the drill rig in, if we can prove this up, if we can develop the asset so we can declare a JORC resource on it, then we've got a line in the sand, and we can then move forward. And that's why you speak to any mining company CEO, the drilling companies are booked out for as long as, and that tells you all you need to know, I think, really about the near-term future for this industry.
Great. Thank you very much, Alan, for talking to us there about Corcel PLC and Premier African Minerals. And let's see what next week brings, eh?
Goodness me. Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, we're getting seismic events, 1 or 2 a week now, aren't we? So goodness knows where we'll be next week, Mark. But looking forward to it. Interesting times.
Indeed. Okay, well, thank you very much, Alan. And yes, catch up again in a week's time.
Indeed. Thanks, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.